to figure out. All right, John, how's it going, man?
Yo, what's up?
Yes,
What's up?
thank you, Lord, man. Holy moly. It's been a minute since we've been trying to figure this shit out. Thank you very
Yeah,
much for taking the time today, dude. It's awesome.
yeah. Sorry, it's been. I know we've been playing like scheduling musical chairs and stuff, but yeah, man,
No,
happy to be
no,
here.
no need to apologize, man. Let me say absolutely thank you so much. I'm so excited, to dig into the stuff that we are today, and so cool too as well as far as being able to go back a little bit and digging into like the shorts and the things that kind of have led up to this as well. It's very wild to see something. So I'll just say, make it short on my end, but to see my heart can't beat unless you tell it to, and be in love with it, and then kind of go back and I was like, okay, well, I can check out some of the stuff that developed these ideas and developed your work in film. And dude, you are killing it.
Hmm.
Even the
Thank
shorts
you.
and the earlier stuff that you've been doing, you and your brother, the gang that you guys have kind of worked with, incredible, man.
Yeah,
Thank you for the
yeah.
work that you're doing. Awesome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, yeah,
So here on Growing on You Live, we're gonna dig into some earlier days, some earlier memories of film. As far as you growing
yeah.
up and your family, film being a very important aspect of your guys' life, and then getting into film yourself. So first of all, starting out now seeing film, a film of your own on a big screen. Bring us back to your local movie theater or video rental shops and special memories that come to mind with these places to you.
I remember I would go to Blockbuster with my parents, and it would be it was just like this ritual that we would go have. I have two brothers. My older brother is the one I collaborate with, and I have a younger brother, and we would all just go. And I remember they had this special that was $1 for unlimited kids movies, and we would just go crazy and rent like all the Goosebumps movies. So I think
Okay.
I was pretty scared of horror movies as a kid. Like I remember trying not to watch many of the, I guess you could say like grown up movies, but all the kids stuff was something that I would try to experiment in and see how much I could withstand. So that's what we would do. And then of course, we'd go to different movie theaters like at least once a week. My parents, none of my family, no one was a filmmaker, but everyone was a film lover. My mom and dad, they were never really into sports. Like their whole thing was just watching movies, and so they would take us every weekend at the very least.
That is awesome. That's so cool. Was there anything as far as that you remember, like when you were still kind of teetering on, trying to test your limits and you're like, oh, this is too far. I need to scale back a little bit.
I vividly remember my older brother and my parents watching Resident Evil, the first one, and
Oh,
I
okay.
was I was upstairs watching it behind like the handlebars of this, and I just couldn't. I don't know what it was, but I just couldn't do it.
Oh, nice. It's so funny too, where like those feelings develop into all of a sudden you're like, man, I need more. Like I was just
Yeah,
thinking about it the other day, like where does that come from? Because it's like it feels like a natural thing to be like, push yourself away from it, but it's
yeah,
something about horror movies, man. You're like, man, I gotta have that
yeah.
feeling again.
Yeah, and it's so strange now because when I look back, I wasn't one of those kids, or even like in high school, I hadn't seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween. I hadn't seen any of the classics until I was like in my 20s.
Hmm.
And now I'm just like digging through whatever I could find to just like expose myself, whether it be like video nasties or like giallo films or just anything, because now it's like an obsession now that I'm making it. I look at it in
Sure.
a completely different way than I did when I was a kid.
Yeah, and even something too. I think it's appreciated and maybe even viewed through your scope now as far as just the overall appreciation for film, and especially
Yeah,
with like Heart Can't Beat, where it's something where initially you're not looking at it as a horror film until you're 10, 15 minutes into the movie and you're like, whoa, where the fuck is this going? Like, what just happened? So, and certainly, I mean, I see that as far as, and you've mentioned family being very like a very close thing and a very tight knit a bond with your family, kind of bleeding into your work as well too. So
Yeah.
I think that all those elements, man, really complement everything, and the story is not just being completely in your face. And even if you did something like that, I'm sure it would be awesome. But I appreciate the stuff that you're putting out, and some of those elements, possibly just out of your appreciation for film in general.
Yeah, I think it definitely comes from that first. And yeah, as you're saying, I think My Heart Can't Beat Unless You Tell It To is like just as much a drama film as it is a horror film. And I think for me, it's hard to disconnect family and storytelling in general. I
Mm.
think everything I've made has some connection to family, and it's always like a familial love. I haven't really dabbled in like romantic love, but it always has to do with siblings or parents and children, and that's just something that I realize is very present in my movies. It might be like a Latino thing, family is such an important thing for my family and my parents, and so I think it's just ingrained in, I have two siblings, and that was just the formula for My Heart Can't Beat. Like I knew it was going to be three siblings, and it's just this dynamic that I've known my whole life.
Okay, okay, nice, nice. So, as far as with some of these earlier memories, does anything come to mind, when visiting your local movie theater or even local, video rental, a Blockbuster, and video cover art or poster art that just popped out to you and just it drew you into possibly something that maybe initially you weren't even interested in, but you're like, I have to check this out.
I know that again, it's like the sacred versus the obsession. Like there was always me going into the horror section at Blockbuster just to see what was there, even if I knew I wasn't going to rent it. And there's always one that stood out to me that and I still haven't seen this movie, not because I'm scared anymore, but just because I haven't watched it. But there was the cover of The Serpent and the Rainbow, the way
Oh
that
yeah, okay,
is it Bill Pullman, I think?
yeah, okay, yep.
He's like in
The
the
lead.
coffin, and
Mhm.
something about his face just terrified me, and I didn't even know. I didn't know what it was about, but I would always like look. I would always just look at it for some reason. It was like this weird thing that I would do, and just seeing. I already knew like the Halloween cover art, like all these things were very present memories from my childhood, even if I didn't watch the movies. And I think that was the section I always went to, kind of sneaked away and just looked at the cover art, maybe read like the summary or the synopsis in the back, but I would never ask my parents to rent them when I was younger.
Would they push that away, or was that something where like, well, if you want to check it out, you go ahead.
It might have been a thing like respecting that it was rated R, and I was not.
Yeah,
I must
yeah.
have been like I wasn't even 14 at the time. So yeah, I think some of these things were violent. I remember we went to watch The Beach, the one with Leonardo DiCaprio, and we
Oh,
we
okay.
went into the movie theater, and we were like, "Oh, it's called The Beach. It can't be anything crazy." And it starts, and they're all like, "Fuck, fuck, 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 fuck." And my parents were like, "All right, let's go." I guess we were too young to be exposed. But I remember the first film that we saw. This was like 2003, so I was 11 years old, and this was when Kill Bill came out. And I
Okay.
remember seeing this movie, and we were in the theater, and there was it just, it got really bloody, really intense. And I looked over at my parents to see like, okay, are we gonna leave? Because I didn't want to, but they just let it ride. And I was like,
Okay.
okay, okay, cool. And I think it's the way that Quentin Tarantino presented the violence. I must have had that sort of feeling that people had with Pulp Fiction, that it was just like a fun thing. So maybe my
Mm.
parents were confused, like, do we leave, or is this like is this a
Right.
cartoon? So I think that really introduced me into like directors, like people make these things. They're not just because I was watching like Flight of the Phoenix and big movies, and I never put that idea that a group of people were making this, like a group of artists. And I think that kind of was an epiphany for me when I watched that movie.
Absolutely. And guys like him, I've always appreciated just because like he was that nerdy kid at the local video shop that just,
Mm.
was watching everything and completely exposing himself to,
Yeah.
but I can agree in the effect that I grew up very old school, traditional Christian. My parents were very, like not watching any of that stuff, not wanting, parental advisory CDs in the house. And so it was always kind of that taste of forbidden fruit where something might have been on TV and you're like, oh, I'm going to try to
Yeah.
watch this for a little bit. And then you hear mom come and you have to turn it for a minute because it's like, I'm not supposed to be watching this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's awesome. I mean,
But it's
so
funny though, because
oh,
my
go ahead.
my parents they still watch these movies. Like they weren't they were we grew up Catholic, but they weren't very strict in that sense. Like they would still enjoy these movies themselves. It was just a way of not exposing us to too much movie violence, I guess, at first. But then it was just like now I watch like French extremity films with my dad, so it's okay.
Oh my god, I can only imagine that's a completely different experience from watching some of those earlier movies to watch like something like Martyrs or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, gee, what's the other
Livid or yeah.
Inside? Have you seen that one?
I saw that one myself, but I haven't seen it. I didn't see it with my dad. We saw
Oh,
we saw high
uh,
tension, we saw
uh-huh.
martyrs, we saw livid. Yeah.
That's a rough ride. It
He
was
loved it.
very wild time in extreme movies for sure. So as far
Yeah.
as upon discovering horror, was there anything as far as an irrational fear that maybe you developed after watching something that wasn't there, before watching something, like a horror movie, and may it be the dark or long hallways or something like that?
I think it really arose like it really brought up a bigger fear that I still deal with today, which is just thinking about death and like trying to wrap my head around it. And I
Mm,
think it started. I had another podcast with Scarred for Life, and we talked about the Storm of the Century, which was like kind of it's kind of corny film, and it's like based on a Stephen King
hmm
story, and it was about choosing they were stuck in this blizzard with this guy and he demanded that they give them one of the townspeople's children, and this idea of just like having to go and your life being over just like was really big for me as a kid, and I rewatched it, and it's very cheesy, it's very 90s, but it still kind of resonates in that way, and it's amazing that it was able to stay with me for these many years. And
okay.
things like I remember I saw Jeepers Creepers, and it wasn't one of those movies that terrified me, but it really upset me because up until that point I always thought, it's good guys and bad guys and the bad guys lose. But at the end of that movie, spoiler alert,
Right.
Justin Long's eyes get taken out and that's how it ends. And I was just upset because I'm like, this isn't supposed to be the way that it is. And I remember I cried and everything.
Oh no. I mean, and certainly like with those characters too, like that was a movie that it draws you in, even with all the silliness.
Yeah,
It's like you start, you really
yeah,
develop, that emotional connection with those two. So
yeah,
I love that. It's funny
yeah.
with
It's
Jeepers
just them
Creepers
too.
because they used to have. You remember the show, the Unsolved Mysteries? Do you know what that is? They used to play it on TV
Yeah,
all the time.
yeah, yeah,
So I live in Michigan, and there was a story that came. It wasn't not too long after I saw Jeepers Creepers, where they talked about that movie was inspired by a story that actually happened somewhere like Southeast Michigan of these
yeah.
two, like this couple or brother
Really?
and sister driving by, seeing this person with like a big white sheet with red all over it, dumping it in like some sort of a waste bin in the backyard and going back, and I was like, oh, that's too
Whoa.
close to home.
Yeah,
It's like shit. I don't like that.
right.
So different things all of a sudden hit differently when certain stories kind of come about, or even like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where they say it's
Right.
based on true events, but then you look into the whole like story behind Ed Gein and things like that. And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
I
There's
don't like that.
there's like the memory of horror films, but then the memory of horror stories that you would hear, or even true crime stories. Like
Oh yeah.
I remember in the mid '90s in Miami, there was a kid that went missing, and his name was Jimmy Rice. And I have some friends on here who probably even remember, and it was like a cautionary tale for kids to not go
Mm,
play outside alone because
mm,
they found they found that the poor kid was like cut up into pieces,
Oh God.
and no one knew what happened, and it was a way for our parents to warn us like don't ever wander off by yourself. So I remember that being a very vivid memory of just like a warning to all the kids playing outside, you know,
Mm.
and that almost stays in your head just as much as any other memory from a horror movie, if not even more.
Yeah. Well, it kind of seems like this odd stigma where people kind of associate or see, like you have an interest in horror movies, or I have horror tattoos, and like, oh, hey, did you see this video that happened, such and such place a couple of weeks ago? And hey, check this out. It's like, just because I like
Yeah,
horror movies, I don't want to see all this fucked up shit you're trying to show me.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not trying to see all these disgusting things that are actually happening in life. Jesus.
yeah.
But or even going through like haunted houses, for instance, which is
Hmm.
completely different. But it's like I don't mess with those, man. Somebody running after me with a chainsaw, I'm not giving it the opportunity for me to be the one.
You see, now I'm into all forms of that stuff. Like I'll go to Halloween
Oh,
Horror
really?
Nights, but I'll also like even to this day I'll go with my friends and we'll just because I live in Miami or I spend a lot of time in Miami, but
Okay.
like the suburb side where it kind of leads into the farms and the Everglades area, me and my friends would just like ride as far as we could until the end where the swamps are, and we would just like sneak into these old houses and old fairgrounds, and it was just like
Oof.
some Silent Hill shit in Miami. And but it
Right.
was just a way to kind of surround ourselves with fear and just
Sure.
like expose ourselves to the idea that something is there, something supernatural. And
Did
there was
any
it's yeah, it's very fascinating.
did anything ever end up popping up out of those journeys?
I mean, we would see animals like we see
Oh,
gators and stuff.
okay. 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 Luckily,
And
no
you know,
ghosts, so.
yeah. Well, there was this one time we went into this campground and we went into one of the offices. It was like an administrative office, and it was very hot in Miami. It was like 80 degrees at night, very humid. But as soon as we went into this room, it was cold. It was like really
Oh.
cold, and you could just feel this energy like on you. But yeah, it. I think it's more the idea of wanting to see something, even though you don't
All
want
right.
to. It's just the tease of like, oh, something might come out. We might see something that scars us forever. But
Yeah, right.
I guess I've
Jeez.
never I've never experienced it really. I've heard sounds, but I think that's about it.
Yeah, let's knock on wood. I do not want to be a part of that. Yeah. Dear
Yeah,
Lord, I love that. I mean, it's funny too. Like you go and you're younger and doing these things, and then you watch Ghost Hunters once, and it's like, oh, this room is at least 10 degrees colder than the last one. I'm
yeah,
out of here. There's something going
yeah,
on
yeah.
here.
Yeah, my friend just put Pazuzu in the comments, and we
Oh,
that's a face that like is ingrained in my mind forever. When I remember seeing that like flash of the white face in The Exorcist, and now we call the house in the Everglades, we call it Pazuzu's house. Like that's our joke.
okay, okay, man, and something so subtle too. Like that is
Yeah,
definitely an element, to touch on with horror, where sometimes you have things where it's just overly in your face and kind
mm,
of out of spur of the moment. But man, that is certainly, and this is going to touch
yeah,
on this next question as far as three scenes, whether in horror or not. That are forever ingrained in your brain, whether visually stunning or something terrifying, disgusting. You mentioning
yeah.
Pazuzu, that could certainly be one of
That's
them.
probably that's probably one. And I remember watching The Exorcist. I was like maybe 17, so I was a little bit older, but I always heard the rumors, that people had heart attacks, and it was like one of the
Mm,
cursed films. And
mm,
so that was the scene. I was waiting for the head and the girl being possessed, but there was this dream sequence from Father Karras, and it's just so quiet. You just kind of, I don't think there's any audio, and it's just a flash. It wasn't even like half a second, and this face just burned into my mind, and I just felt so uncomfortable by it. And I've had like recurring dreams with this face. Like it's been a part of my life, and I used it as references for my own monsters in short films. So it's just like
mm.
it's very powerful, and I know that it's it was like a makeup test that they did on one of the stand-ins for Pazuzu. It wasn't even like the final concept, but it was just the scrappiness of it is what scared me. It was so simple, just a
Oh
white
wow,
face,
no
hollow
kidding.
eyes, human teeth. And I think that's what scares me most is like the more human looking things. That's what always got to me. Which goes to my second scene, which is right behind you, is It was another film that fucking terrified me as a kid.
Okay.
And the one scene in particular, I remember the one in the shower where he comes out of the drain and it when he goes back in, you could tell it's like so fake. It's like this blow up doll. But
Yeah,
something about that just made it worse for me. Like the
yeah.
fact that it looked so fake and so cheap in a way, it made it scarier. Um,
Okay.
and I guess a movie that kind of stayed with me. It's hard to pick them, but I know that The Mummy was one that I loved as a kid because again, it was like I think the whole sequence with all the beetles. My mom is terrified of cockroaches, and
Okay.
that was always just a fun one. I think that kind of introduced me to the idea of mixing genres, right? Because that was like sort of a horror movie, but I could watch it. I was like, yeah, I could watch it. I'm brave, but it was really like an adventure film at the same time, and even
Right.
like a comedy film. So I think it was a way for me to kind of like sneak into the genre, into the horror genre, and I was kind of taken aback by the scenes with the mummy, but it was a way for me to it softened the blow a bit to see Brendan Fraser like making jokes and stuff.
Right. Okay. Initially, I thought you were talking about the older Mummy, but this is like the '90s
No,
with
yeah,
Brendan
yeah,
Fraser.
yeah,
Then.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. Man,
This
the
was like
Scarabs.
a big yeah, a big adventure movie when I was a kid. And then The Mummy
Yes.
Returns. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I should have said that. It's not the old Universal Mummy, but
Okay. Okay. I love that movie. That movie was so cool. I for whatever reason I'm trying to think now of what happens, but there's a moment in the movie with scarabs. Like, do they start burrowing in your skin, or
yeah, yeah. And they would
Man.
like walk through their skin and like eat them
Yes,
alive. Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
Oh man, yeah, that for sure. God, I haven't seen that movie in
yeah.
so long. I'm gonna have to watch it again. That part
It's one.
grossed me out,
It's one of
uncomfortable.
those movies. It's one of those movies that I'm a bit apprehensive to revisit because the way that I hold it so dear in my memory, and if I watch it, I know it's going to be
Yeah,
kind of outdated, but I want to preserve my idea of what it was rather than
yeah,
what it actually is. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah. For what? It's the scarabs and hemotep. That's the other
Yeah,
thing that I
yeah, yeah,
remember of it.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
it's even amazing that I remember either of those things. So, so it's still there.
yeah, yeah.
So you touched on with Quentin Tarantino with Kill Bill, just as far as with filmmaking. Does anything come to mind as far as this common interest with your family and watching movies constantly and it kind of dawning on you different elements of staging or cinematography
Yeah.
or the process of film, past that where you started really looking into or kind of paying attention to blocking and things like that.
I It's interesting because I don't think that came until I actually started studying film in
Okay.
college because it was more of a thing of storytelling. It always came from a place of how do I tell a story? I would make comic books in elementary school, and then in high school I was in creative writing. So it was always a way of just like I would watch these movies and I would kind of dissect the script more than anything. Like what is happening, who are the characters, and so it always came from that perspective. And then in college, well, I think at the end of high school too, you start discovering like cool movies and stuff.
Mhm.
But it was really in college when one of my ex-girlfriends and my friend who was also here, his name is Thomas. They started introducing me to like art house movies and independent cinema
Okay.
and foreign films. And then I started to really pay attention to it. And now I
Mm.
can't watch a movie without looking at the blocking and the staging and the whole craft of it. And it kind of takes away from my experiences. But it's just the way that it is now. It's almost like I'm studying. And now
Oh,
you
okay.
know, I've seen films like No Country for Old Men like 20 times, and I'm just looking at where are they putting the camera, and you know,
Mm.
what sounds are they adding or omitting. And it's really like a study of the craft now, which is really fun.
Okay. Has it kind of, I guess first and foremost, as a fan of film, has it, become a little bit of an irritation when you go to sit down and enjoy something? You're like, God, why can't I just, why can't
Yeah.
I just have fun with this?
It's interesting because, you know, you they say when you're engrossed, you won't notice it, and sometimes that's true. But I always feel like, how did
It's
they?
there.
I'm like, wait, this is a wonder. Why did they put the camera here? Or, and then I see like, oh, that light just flicked on. Like I noticed the artistry, which it's fun in its own way, but I'd rather do that upon second viewing or at home. And in the theater, most of the time I'm pulled away and I just experience it. But there are those movies that, you know, especially when they get press, like, oh, it's one shot or something like that. Like
Mhm.
1917, I was just looking for like the seamless transitions the
Ripley.
whole time, you know?
Yeah, yeah, right, right. Yeah, that's awesome. And so you went to film school. Did your brother as well, Michael, or
Yeah.
did he end up going to? Okay, so you guys both went to film school. Was this at
He
the
went,
same
yeah.
time, or?
No, he's a bit he's like a year, almost 2 years older than me, and he
Yeah.
went
Okay.
actually he got a degree in music education first, and he
Right.
took a little break, and then he noticed that the college in Miami, Miami-Dade, they started a film program for the bachelors, and so he joined in, and I just kind of followed him in. I think at that point we were interested in storytelling in a bigger way, and I had started looking into screenwriting and what it was. And so I just joined in, and we had a few classes together, but he was already a little bit more advanced.
Oh, okay, okay. Now, before working in film, you've mentioned in a couple of interviews here, just as far as you guys working together even at a younger age and having some early jobs that really kind of
Yeah.
brought the bond together. What were some of those moments? What were some of those jobs where maybe in the frustration of things, you're like, man, we got to make this shit happen.
We worked at Publix, which is a grocery store
Okay.
in Florida, and he was a cashier and I was like a bag boy.
Okay.
So, you know, we were always hanging out whether in or out of work, so it just felt like a natural continuation of our friendship and our brotherhood. And then we also worked at a Chili's for a few years, which is funny. But it but it,
Okay.
it it kind of shows the way that we behave and react to things when because a restaurant is very much like a movie set. It's almost like it's this big group of people trying to meet a goal and everyone's kind of hectic and screaming, and I feel like me and my brother were always the calmer ones. And then when we transitioned into short films, it felt very much the same way. We were able to communicate with very few words, and we kind of just knew instinctively what we wanted from one another, and
Mm.
we were very pretty calm throughout. Like even if we were freaking the fuck out inside, we tried to we tried to remain calm in the exterior. Um, and you know, yeah, we did music videos together. We've shot weddings together. We all the
Sure.
it just runs the gamut, and I think it all just strengthens your bond. But I think just growing up with him and being so close kind of creating our own misadventures when we were kids, and you know, we would pretend to be characters from movies, so we always just had this inclination towards creating fantasy worlds with our younger brother as well, and just being in this mind because we grew up before the internet was like a big thing, so we were outside playing and just like creating stories, and we would even film like shitty home videos sometimes.
Okay, nice. And touching on, you mentioned, working in a place like Chili's, now working in film and having this interest in horror, does it kind of coincide a little bit where you think back at all the just natural horrors of how crappy people can be and working in a restaurant? And you're like, man, you guys are trying to make a monster, like it back here, and it's like take a regular person on a Saturday night that's pissed because they didn't get enough ranch and Boy, that's a whole different horror.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's interesting because I feel like my perspective on like I have Jessie's a waiter and she's a server in My Heart Can't Beat, and I
Uh-huh.
feel like I was like, okay, I'm gonna give my nuanced take on how shitty
Oh.
working as a server is because you know you see films like Waiting and it's always so exaggerated, but this was like the little things like, oh, why aren't you smiling? Like I had a coworker who he had Bell's palsy, so half of his face
Oh.
it looked like he was kind of frowning, and there
Hmm.
was a table that gave him shit for that, and they were like, "Why don't you smile more?" And he's like, "I have Bell's palsy, ma'am," and she just felt you could see the life drain out of her, and it's just those kind of things that it's very
Good.
like
Mind your
degrading,
damn
you know?
business. Shit. Maybe I'm having a
Yeah,
terrible day. You know what I'm saying? What do you want for
right.
food? Shit. Let's get this done
Yeah,
with.
yeah, yeah. But I had people say that they were gonna beat me up because I didn't get them a beer and shit like that. So it's you
Oh.
kind of, but it's good. You have to work and kind of grow up and see that this is kind of how it is. And I think customer service is a good starting point for filmmakers because a lot of it is like dealing and handling and working with people and talking to
Hmm.
people, trying to understand and
Sure.
empathize with people. So I think it's a good experience overall.
I think restaurants in general. I think a lot of the younger, entitlement of kids nowadays, if they spent a couple of years in a restaurant, man, that shit
Yeah,
just beats you down and molds you in a different way. Sometimes you don't
yeah,
want to be molded. It's like I could tell
yeah.
you never worked a restaurant or or
Yeah,
hard
yeah,
labor, young
yeah,
man.
yeah. It'll humble you a bit, and like at the grocery store, sometimes I would clean the bathrooms, and you'd see some nasty shit, and like I think that's good. It's good for you. I'm very privileged, but it was good to expose myself to that kind of labor at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know mentioning Waiting too. That was one movie where it was like I thought this was a comedy. This is absolutely a horror. Like this is
Yeah,
my life right now. Like why am I
yeah,
watching
yeah,
this? This isn't fun.
yeah, yeah.
So as far as you're mentioning, these earlier times of transitioning into making home movies and doing different things and kind of taking on working with your brothers and whatnot. Bring us back to your this first camera. Where does this come from? As far as was it a gift or was it gifted to you? And maybe some of the earlier
Hmm.
things that you were first making, dabbling into making shorts.
My dad worked at Bell South for many years. Well, it's AT&T now, and my
Sure.
mom and
Okay.
dad worked there. So I feel like they would just come home with these gadgets. Like it wasn't a specific camera that I held near and dear. It was just there, kind of in the closet. And I remember my Mike, my older brother, he just wanted to make like a random film, and so I think at this point he was in high school and he was taking TV production. So he started learning about scenes being built with shots. Like, oh, we have to put the camera here and then do the same thing from this angle. And I was just very overwhelmed, but we started to do it, and then we did it with my younger brother, and I was acting in it with my younger brother. And then at one point Mike was like, "All right, I'm bored now. Like, I don't want to do this." So, so we got the footage we had captured, and we started editing on this like clunky compact computer, and I feel like we edited 30 seconds, and it was just like freezing. I don't even remember the program, but it wasn't like Final Cut or anything. It was like this movie maker, movie go, film maker, something just random. And yeah, it was just our way of experimenting. We wanted to be around the software and just like feel how it is to make a movie, but we were still kids, so I think we got bored. And
Okay.
but I think also in high school, like when I took creative writing classes, there was a thing that we had to do. Like our final project was kind of a play. Like we had to write a story, but have the classmates be actors and then perform it in front of the class. And I just hated the idea of that. So we would
Okay.
always convince the teacher to let us make a movie instead. So we would all gather on a
Oh,
weekend
okay.
and film like a very badly made movie and just present it on this little TV in the corner of the classroom. And no one really watched it, and you couldn't hear shit because the sound was just so bad. And but it was just our way of wanting to make movies, you know?
Oh, dude, it's so funny because that makes me think of in school, me and my friends had made like a movie that was something that they ended up playing over like the school like TV station or whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
And that
yeah,
same thing, you can't really hear shit, but you know the dialogue and what's going on, so you're
yeah,
laughing, you're looking around like, oh, nobody else is laughing. Like maybe this
yeah,
is
yeah,
horrible.
yeah. I
Just that
remember
personal
that
enjoyment. I love that.
there was like the TV production kids, and they would always get featured on this channel. And I was like, damn, this is like getting into Sundance for like high school students, is like getting on this
Right,
channel.
right,
But
right.
my form was always like in, the independent way. It was through the classrooms.
Okay. That's awesome. As far as you had mentioned is working with music videos and then shorts and kind of like developing up your work into your most recent feature. What can you tell us about your short, "The Horse and the Stag," and what may have inspired this take on well, I guess what I took out of it was the coping process. It felt like it was very focused on that, and maybe not, but that
Yeah.
was kind of the take on what I took from that. What can you tell us about that short?
Yeah, it definitely has to do with that. And I think, again, it's like me wrestling or asking myself these questions about death and how it's handled. But it's funny because it was this idea of like a surrogate mother and a surrogate kid. This it's about this mother who keeps this kid hostage, and then you find out that her son had killed herself because the young man was bullying her son. And but then at the end he comes back, and I was interested with this idea that they still need one another in a way, and they still need one another's affection. Like, she didn't have a kid anymore, and he says during the film that he doesn't have a mother. And so
Mm.
they almost found themselves through this tragic moment. And there's something bittersweet about that for me. But I think the idea stemmed from just a location. We were gonna shoot another film, and this was a my friend Andres Cuervo, who he lived in Homestead, which was kind of like far out in the farmlands. And there was this sun-baked motorhome that it just looked like shit, and it was in the middle of his backyard. I was like, "What is this?" And I think it inspired this weird story that I kind of again wrapped up with family and kind of gravitated towards horror-ish. And so I think locations for me kind of inspire many things because it's a visual thing, and then I start to imagine like who would live in this. It had gone through two hurricanes, and I'm like, who would live in this, and why would they live in this? What would they be doing? So I start to see it from that point of view.
Oh wow, yeah. Even for a short, like you have certain times where you watch a short and it's like, oh, okay, that can kind of be. But that was something. I mean, completely enamored me and pulled me in, and
Hmm.
uh, slightly disgusted at the end because I'm just like, oh, why, what is he going back for? And then you start
Yeah,
thinking about the process as far as him talking about not having a mother and her and the situation that she was going through. I'm just like, oh my god. So
yeah,
I appreciate that, and I think it's something too, as well as to say as far as you mentioned the kind of process of like processing death and the different routes that you've gone throughout that, and it's still feeling like completely different worlds. It's something where you're kind of
yeah,
still on maybe like essentially like a little bit of a similar take, but yeah, wow, that's absolutely right, and such a touching film for it just being a short. I don't. I think it was. Is it on your Vimeo or was it on YouTube? I'm trying to think
yeah.
now of where I watched
It's
it.
on, it's on Vimeo. Yeah, and
Okay.
then through my website you can watch it. But yeah, it's a
Okay. Yeah.
short. It's a short. I mean, it's like 9 minutes, but it's. I think my brother and I gravitate towards like a lot of our horror films are like sad horror, and it's very
Mm.
much an observation of people's lives and when they're grieving something. And I think that's where we maybe that's just our perspective. Like a lot of the times I see movies nowadays, and they kind of end with a crazy murder or something very bloody. And for me, I'd rather see something a little bit more meditative, and that's just
Sure.
my instinct as a storyteller.
Hmm. Man. So with My Heart Can't Beat Unless You Tell It To, initially, this was a full length feature from based around the short Kuru, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And then, so as far as what changes ended up coming from you had this short wanting to develop it into a full length, and what were some things that maybe even from the original you wanted to change up a little bit? I noticed that Thomas's name was changed. Was there anything, like specifically like
Yeah.
reasons why?
My producer Kenny Riches was like, Oscar, the way that it was written,
Mm.
that's I just plucked that straight out of Let the Right One In, and he's like, yeah, you have to change that. Like that's like,
Okay.
and so one of my best friends, Thomas, who's been on this live, I think the whole time, he played the younger brother in the short,
Oh yeah. Oh,
and
okay. Wow.
that was like his first time acting. He did a great job, but we named the character after him, like as a way. So now the
God. Yeah.
younger brother in the movie that Owen Campbell plays, his name is Thomas. So that was one of the
Okay.
changes, and I think in the original short, it was cannibalism instead of vampirism.
Right.
And this was a great note from our executive producers, Matt Wiggum and Kenny Riches, and they were saying that people don't know because the way that I was approaching it was that this cannibalism was a disease and he needed to eat flesh. But when people see cannibalism or think cannibalism,
Did
sorry
I get
about
you
the
back?
lag.
Sorry, I don't know what the hell
Yeah,
happened there. All
yeah.
right. Okay. Okay. So you're touching on him or the view of needing
Yeah,
flesh.
needing flesh, but they said that in popular media, usually if it's not a zombie, you see like Hannibal Lecter, or Cannibal Holocaust. It's not a biological necessity, it's more of a psychological thing. And so they
Oh, okay.
said vampirism, everyone knows that vampires need blood to survive. And so I thought that that was great because it would mean that I didn't have to explain the myth or the archetype of horror, because
Hmm.
as you know, I jump right into this situation that these siblings are in, and my heart can't beat. And that was a way for me not to have to explain anything. If you know that he needs blood, he can't be exposed to sunlight. That's kind of the main tenets of a vampire. And then that meant that I could explore the rituals of the family instead of the rules of a vampire because that's so ingrained in popular culture.
It's so rad. I mean, and as far as myself, I don't want to give like any, like huge spoilers or anything like that. But even just a moment later in the movie where you could have gone, many ways as far as kind of like with wrapping up this story. Just something simple like him opening the shade, so to speak, and then it's just score. You're not hearing anything so much,
Yeah.
speaking, seeing, anything from Thomas and just different parts like that where I'm like, what the fuck, man? This
Yeah.
is so rad. I absolutely love that. And leaving, like element, room for, just your imagination to expand and kind of what's coming from that and where Dwight is in
Yeah.
that situation from it being as chaotic and crazy as the situation is, it's like, how do I feel like I'm like in this family right now? Like absolutely pulled into, just the characters of everything too. So
Yeah, I think
touche.
thank you. Thank you. I think it's like it's two things. It's kind of like the budget dictates certain things. So, we were making a movie that we kind of stepped away from looking at these horror things. Like we didn't see anything close up of like slitting someone's throat. It was kind of at a distance, and that was a choice, but it also complemented the budget that we were in because it was a very low budget. And so we knew that we weren't going to cut and show Thomas kind of decaying or however we were going to portray the vampire dying, because we couldn't. We just didn't have the budget. And I was okay with that because it was not the horror film that we were making to go so big and theatrical like that. But we did shoot a reaction, we did shoot a reverse shot of Thomas like under the covers after the fact. but it just didn't, we didn't
Oh,
need it. Like we just thought the reaction that Dwight has at the window, and this is like a testament to the crew and the cast, is the light just like blasting in. My brother had like this huge unit out there, and then our colorist kind of brought that out even more, and she made the room like kind of filter out with light. And then our
oh,
supervising sound editor, Mark Stokinger, he's the one who decided, like, okay, well, he's not seeing his brother, so he shouldn't hear him either. So we just used the
oh,
score,
wow,
and the sunlight kind of, it was so strong that it even droned out the audio. Like that was his idea. So it's just like everyone coming together, and let's all like try to complement one another to give this effect that hopefully works, and it worked for you. So then I think we did our job in that way.
man, that is so awesome, and it's so cool too. I mean, like hearing some of this stuff. I told you actually, I when we you know kind of we're setting this up. I was like, I really don't want to do research, and it's not out of the
Yeah,
fact of like I don't give a fuck about like like doing my part in these things. I just wanted to hear all of this stuff like firsthand, and hearing the
yeah,
like things like that. So cool, man, and it's rad, where it was like a deliberate thing as far as just the impact of the the visuals and not having anything as far as hearing anything in the background. That's awesome,
yeah.
and very very much so moving too. So that's so sick. I love that.
Thank
With
you.
the, so you've mentioned, because in my research as far as the inspiration for the story, coming through the process as far as your grandmother and being in hospice care. How did this come to tunnel that true to life hurt as far as into a horror film?
I think for me, it's talking about these things through the lens of a horror film, or filtering it through a horror film, and I think it makes it a little bit more digestible. It makes it a little bit more enjoyable. It's okay to maybe laugh at things or be thrilled by certain things that are just bleak in real life. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the film is still very sad and it's pretty bleak, but if it was just a film about brother and sister taking care of their sick brother, I feel like that'd be very depressing. And so we wanted to add this thing where they're sacrificing, in this case, real people to feed something, and it was kind of the enabling of an addiction too. I think a lot of people
Mm.
read it as an addiction tale, like they're sort of enabling their younger brother. But for
Right.
me, it was a family sacrificing relationships in order to take care of a loved one who's sick, and then also from the sick person's point of view, the way that they're treated or mistreated or kind of held captive in a house, and not they're not allowed to have experiences in the outside world. So for me, it was very much about hospice, and about my grandmother. And my it was interesting because I made it with my dad too. He was the production designer, and this was his
Oh
mother that we
wow.
were yeah, his mother. This was his mother we were talking about. So it was very close to home. And I have a huge family, and I've shown some of my uncles and cousins, and they could kind of see the connection. Or at the very least, they're like, we see the importance of family in the film. And to me, that's enough. It's
Sure.
this exploration of a family just going through something difficult and trying to stay afloat with love, but it's all like dysfunctional. And so it's interesting because I've always said it like, this is a film about a dysfunctional family. That's what I say when we would play it at festivals. But people started to tell me like that they're not a dysfunctional family. They're a very functional family. They're just in
Mhm.
a dysfunctional situation. And I think that's a very interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah, I think either way, you could walk away and feel satisfied.
Yeah,
Whether it be a dysfunctional family or a family dealing with a dysfunctional situation, you're like, well,
yeah,
I think I can tip my hat to either one of those titles.
yeah, yeah,
Well, as far as inspirations for the movie, you've mentioned, Let the Right One In, We Are What We Are, but Michael had mentioned Gregory Crewdson's photography as far
yeah.
as the inspiration for visual aesthetics. what props or set pieces may have been already on hand as far as what that were available, and what may have been some things that you guys had hand selected or picked, as far as to really bring the visuals from some of this photography's inspiration into the visuals of the movie.
I think for him, it came from a place of just observing the mundane aspects of suburban life, and
Okay.
the way that these compositions are shown is just people sitting on a bed or watching TV, and it seems very boring, but there's something quite beautiful about these images, and I think that's what really stood out for my brother. He wanted to kind of just put the camera and leave it alone and just observe this weird family. And I think that Gregory Crewdson photography kind of emulates that same feeling, or we were trying to emulate that same feeling. And
Mm.
so it came more from a composition and the staging of it all. But I think as far as props and set dressing, which my dad was in charge of, this house kind of went through a big transformation. Like it looks very lived in, and I think that's just a testament to my dad's work and making it feel like it all makes sense. But when we went in there, it did not look like that. Like the dining room table
Wow.
was not there. Like the dining room was like kind of a messy gaming area, and it was just like one guy living in there who was very hospitable with us, and he kind of got out of our hair and let us do whatever we wanted. But we brought in the bathtub. That was like a stand-in shower with a wall that we like took down. The kitchen, they didn't even have the pantry.
Shit.
We had we had to build the pantry, and my dad had to like cut down the rose bushes in the back to give access to the truck for the scenes where the truck pulls in. It was like a big
Wow.
workload on my dad and like some of the producers who helped him kind of landscape and build these things, but it just shows like we wanted it to look as natural as possible and like nothing had been touched and that everything was very lived in and old, and a lot of it was just making it feel that way through real objects like from thrift stores. And the thrift store
Mm.
that we shot at, the guy was so nice, he let us borrow a bunch of his things. So I wish I could
Oh
have kept
wow.
more. I wish I could have kept some of those, but we had to give them back because he was just like, "Yeah, borrow whatever you want." So like, I think the karaoke machine was actually his.
Oh, sick. That rules. Yeah, that would have been something to have on hand, to be able to bring back home.
Yeah,
Was that bad boy? I mean, not only a
yeah,
prop, but I mean, what a sick machine for sure. That thing was rad.
yeah. Just like the idea of for marketing this kind of separate. There's a separate tangent, but I wish we would have gone to more festivals without the COVID thing, because I would have been like, every after party for the film is like a karaoke party. Like it's just it has to be karaoke.
Oh my God, that would have been so awesome.
Yeah.
Or even there, if they somehow like set it up on the projector and then they just had the music playing. It's an
Oh,
idea.
in the yeah,
Right in the
yeah,
right in
yeah,
the theater, right after the showing. Shit. Trying
yeah,
to come up and sing
yeah,
a song.
yeah.
Damn, that would have been rad. Great idea. I'll edit that out if at any point further in the career you're gonna have another karaoke machine in a movie.
We'll see.
It might be a move. Shit.
Yeah.
What was the first scene shot, and what was the shot that you guys ended up wrapping with?
The first scenes were, it was like a very fluid day because we were trying to block shoot, which is like shooting every room and then just like completely shooting it out. So we started with Dwight's room because most of Dwight. Did I cut off there?
Nope, you're good.
Oh, okay. So most of it was just him lying down and just like moping around, and so we shot all that pretty quickly, and we felt confident. So it was a lot of the stuff where he's like replacing the picture frame and playing the guitar. That was all the first day. But then the second part of the first day was the shed. So it was like this very intense scene, the one
Oh
the one
boy.
with the illegal immigrant Eduardo. And so we kind of pivoted, but I think it was good to start off with something easier and kind of slowly build our confidence. And I was nervous to work with Patrick. Like I know that
Mm.
he's done bigger films, and here I am, like this guy making his first film, and my brother was nervous, but I think Patrick was very kind and kind of helped us out a lot and believed in us. So by the time we got to the shed, which was like a very pivotal moment in the film and very big performance wise, I think they just nailed it because we already all felt comfortable with one another. And the last scene we shot, we were at the motel. That was like the last couple days. And I remember the last shot was the shot of Jesse pulling up with the car to the front of the motel. I felt
Oh,
like we
okay.
needed a transition, and Kenny's like, "Oh, just shoot this," and we looked, and the neon sign was there, so it was kind of lit up for us already, and we just like got this quick shot, and then that was it. We wrapped. I think that's in. I'm gonna release like this BTS video soon, and I think that's actually in it, like the where we say that's a wrap. So
Sick. That's awesome.
yeah.
And where's the locationing of this? Did you guys film in Florida then?
No, this was in Utah. This was in Salt Lake City. Yeah,
Oh shit. Okay. Wow. No
yeah,
kidding. What
yeah.
like what was the draw of I mean being so far from home?
Yeah. So it's kind of a long story, but Kenny Riches, he's a director first, and he's from Salt Lake City originally, and he moved to Miami. And so my brother and I were very eager to work on his features as a director.
Okay.
And we were just trying to work on anything. And my brother, I really credit my brother with this because he was just so like trying to work with Kenny, like, hey, let me work on your film. Hey, let me work on your film. And I think Kenny at one point was like, all right, fuck, you can work on my film. But then we just became really close, and it became a friendship more than anything. And I think when we were wrapping Kenny's movie, I had worked like assistant editor, and my brother was a gaffer on it.
Right.
Kenny kind of took interest in us as people, and then he saw, oh, we made Kuru, and I told him, yeah, I wrote a feature version of Kuru, and so he read it and shared it with his producing partner Matt Wiggum, and them to make the company Duelist, and then
Okay.
Duelist, they agreed to help us make it. So that's how it started. But Duelist is also based in Salt Lake City. Patrick Fugit is like Kenny's best friend, and he's also from Salt Lake City. We got the tax incentive from over there. The locations just worked out, and I think every that kind of felt like home base for a lot of the other crew. So I was like,
Okay.
okay, I mean, we're making a feature, and it'll be like a fun trip, a fun weird work vacation. So I was just down to do it.
Wild. I mean yeah, that's awesome and very cool too. I mean, as far as where you guys kind of had the mindset where it's like, you know what, if it's something that's going to complement and maybe make an ease on, a bigger portion, of the crew or certain members, it's like, well, let's just go and take a trip, make some,
Yeah,
make a fun time out of it. How long did you
yeah.
guys end up shooting for?
We shot for 20 days.
Oh, okay. Damn.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
that's a lot to get done.
Yeah. Yeah, we had 21 days at first, and then one of our actors, Patrick, had this other thing he had to do, and so our AD came up to us and like, "Hey, it's about to get harder." And I'm like, "Wait, I thought it was supposed to get easier." And then, so we cut out a day, but at the end of it all, like the way we everyone just kind of scheduled it, and it didn't feel like much of a difference. But yeah, dude, it's like 20 days, and we're shooting car chases and a lot of stunts, a lot of company moves. We were in the house for like 2 weeks, but then after that, it was like all over the place. Like we were driving
Oh,
across
okay.
Salt Lake City and going to the Great Salt Lake and in the mountains, and so it was quite an expedition.
Dang. Wow, that's awesome. Was there anything that, comes to mind as far as happy accidents? May it be something that, you initially were shooting and the blocking of it kind of was thrown off, or and it, or shooting a shot and somebody's reaction was a little different than you were anticipating, but you're like, it made it all the better. Does anything come to mind?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that, as far as the way that we shot the film, we had planned to do a lot more shots and a lot more coverage. Like just a scene where the sister gets up and like sings the title track in front of the TV. That was like 4 shots. And then we saw this thing play out in this wide shot. And my brother and I looked at each other and we were like, we don't need another shot. Like it's all right here. And
Okay.
I think that's also like when you're shooting a feature, it's different from a short because you start to get comfortable in the language and like the language of that film. And you're thinking like, oh yeah, we did this scene like that, so we could do this scene like that.
Okay.
And so you get comfortable in the cinematic language of that film in particular. And in a short film, maybe it's like too quick to get comfortable within that. But I think
Mhm.
in this, we start to realize like, oh yeah, we only did one shot for that scene, so let's do the same here. And you kind of feel more secure with your choices in that way. And I think that kind of felt like happy accident.
Okay. Yeah.
And just like there's cat like a lot of our crew is in this film. Like the person who gets killed at the beginning with the tattoos, that's one of our producers. Um, uh, the woman who works at the hotel, like the clerk,
Mhm.
she's our script supervisor, and that's because last second the guy who worked at the motel, he's like, yeah, I'll do it, but then we found out he went home because his shift ended, and she just like stepped up. Yeah, she stepped up to the plate, and it was great. And we have those things everywhere. Like our the producer Kenny's dad is the man who Jesse gets under the bridge when she asks him for directions, and then she shows up with him in the wheelchair. Dad, that's Kenny's dad. So it's
Oh
just a,
my
a bunch
God.
of the crew is actually in the movie, and I think those are fun little not accidents, but just like how do we make things work,
Yeah, going
And
with the flow of it. Yeah.
there was one that's like kind of from a big one in pre-production that we were supposed to Jessie was supposed to be played by another actress, and like 2 weeks before she dropped out, so we were like scrambling to get another Jessie, and now I feel like having Ingrid was the biggest blessing of all. Like at first I was so worried, like, oh, we're not gonna get a Jessie, and if we didn't have a Jessie, we couldn't shoot the film because she's in so many of the scenes.
Yeah.
But we were just blessed to end up with her.
It's so complimentary. I mean that's I don't know who the other person was, but I mean as far as just seeing her and just the vast like plethora, I guess, of emotions that
Yeah,
even her character alone had me going through, in this story, in this journey. It's just like certain moments that I'm kind of like feeling for the situation as messed up as it is, and there's other moments where I'm like, God, I
yeah,
cannot stand this fucking lady. Like she's ruining fucking everything.
yeah.
This poor fella just wants to leave and he's trapped. But yeah, no, it's so funny that you said the fella at the motel they left, because like if I just I just imagine myself like if somebody was like, "Hey, do you want to be in a movie?" I
Yeah,
would have probably stuck around for the next 12 hours. Like, hey, let me
right.
know what I can do. Shit.
Yeah,
And this
yeah.
motherfucker's just like, yeah, my shift's done, man. I gotta go.
At the same time, I'm like, I respect that. The man just like he's like, I'll do the movie, but it's part of my shift. Like if you guys go past my shift, I'm going home. Like fuck this. We were shooting overnight too, so he's probably like, I'm not gonna stick around. Like,
Oh my God. That is so funny to me. Holy shit. All right, let me gain my composure. I about fucking started spitting when you when you first said that. I didn't know if there was
my
more to the story, but
my dad my dad another like fun fact is my dad is
oh
is
God.
the guy in the picture in the shed, like the picture that
Oh
Eduardo
yeah.
has in his wallet. That's a picture of
Uh-huh.
my dad actually, like in the 80s when my dad actually first immigrated to Miami.
Wow, no kidding.
Yeah,
So what was that an element? I mean, as far as so with some of your family and immigrating and coming over to America and having the situation of having the well, did it name the fellow that he picks up
yeah.
that wasn't
Eduardo,
speaking?
yeah, Eduardo.
Okay, okay. Was there elements of that? I mean, as far as even drawing from
Yeah,
personal stories or even horrors, things that you had heard growing up, where it was just something of an appreciation and something that you wanted to touch on with already dealing with a terrible situation, and then you're in a
Yeah.
place that you don't know anybody, you're not native
Hmm.
to the tongue yet. Uh,
Yeah.
Horrible,
So
scary moment.
yeah, my both of my parents, they're Colombian. They came from Colombia in the 80s. They actually met in
Mm,
Miami, but they didn't know each other in Colombia. But they, it wasn't exactly this situation, but they had the some misfortunes like coming here. They start from scratch. They have to learn the language. It's like that assimilation process is a hard one. And my mom, she came here and she lost her mother here, and so it was a lot about like building themselves from the ground up. And so it was kind of a tribute to them as immigrants, and having something of us, even if it was like a small subplot, um, it became like a commentary on how these people might be treated in American society. And it wasn't just like
mm,
immigrants, it was other marginalized people like sex workers and homeless people, the elderly, and the way that they're treated. Like all the victims are, if you notice, they're all kind of marginalized people.
mm.
And but the immigrant specifically, yeah, I was very interested in this idea of miscommunication. And Dwight is so fucked that he can't even have like the foundation of language. Like they maybe could be friends in some world, but they don't even have the same tongue. Like they can't even understand one another. And I thought that that
Right.
was very. It's like a lot of desperation comes from that on both of their sides. Like the immigrant just wants to be understood too, and it's
Mm,
kind of this idea of he was expecting the American dream and he ends up like in this fucking
man.
dog shit situation. And so it was just a way of introducing that, which is something I want to explore more in future movies, like have more Latino characters and just like have more Spanish language stuff. But it was good to hear some Spanish in the film and have a Latino character. But it was originally written as a Colombian character, but in Salt Lake City, it's there's not many Colombians roaming around, and especially not any actors. So we kind of switched it and configured it to a Mexican American actor, Moises, and had to change some of the curse words because there's very specific Colombian curse words that Mexicans don't say.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like no trick, no good. No.
Yeah, yeah. Or they never heard of it, They've never heard of that
Oh,
word
okay.
because it's
Wow.
just like it's like if, a Southern spoke to someone in the Midwest, maybe there's like a disconnect.
Sure, sure. Okay. And it was something where even though a couple of moments in the movie it really triggered just the thought in my mind as far as, and you touching on this, as far as somebody coming and wanting the American dream, and then in the back of my mind I'm thinking about the journey that they may have had to take as far as getting over here and the struggles and some of the strife that they
Yeah,
had to go through, finally getting over here and thinking, okay, shit's about to get better. I'm gonna be able to make things maybe better for family back home, and then ending up in that situation. I was just like, fuck. Even that moment, like it wasn't like I say, just a small, like
yeah,
or not small, but it was just a certain moment of the overall film. But even that moment, I was like, man, that would be absolutely
yeah,
horrible and heartbreaking. You know?
yeah. And I think too, like there's a thing that bumps some people, the fact that when he escapes the shed, he comes back into the house. Like he could have ran away, right? Which
Mm,
is kind of the rational thing to do. And a lot of people say like, oh, that's kind of silly in a plot way. But for me, it's like this man has so much pent up anger and resentment already. Like he's so tired of the way he's been treated and
yeah.
ignored, and he's not acknowledged. So he's like, I'm gonna go in here and like get my revenge on this person. Like he's kind of letting it all out on Dwight. And
Mm,
it ultimately leads to his demise. But I think it was a choice that he made. You know, I think
Hmm.
at some point he's like, I've had enough. Like this is where I draw the line.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, and one of those things too, where you're like, you don't know where the story's and gonna go from here, but if it goes to where he goes and he just starts massacring these bastards, it's like, all right, I can deal
Yeah.
with this.
No, I it's so funny you say that because now when I look back, I'm like, imagine the film just switched to his perspective and he's just like fucking up this family. And I'm like, that would have been awesome if we
Dude.
just switched to like the immigrant's perspective and like kind of his
Mm.
comeuppance, getting his come up, the family getting their comeuppance, I think would have been an interesting way to go.
I mean, I can edit out this part, and at some point just make that happen.
Yeah, yeah.
It'd be absolutely
Multiverse.
awesome to see. Right. So the title being inspired by lyrics in "I'm Controlled by Your Love" by Helene Smith. What can you tell us about some of the music used in the film, from what scored it, or possibly the tracks that were used? Certainly the music and the karaoke scenes that they're singing really
Yeah.
resonated as far as maybe special tunes to you and upbringing, or personal interests.
I think it's cool because when you have a film of this scope, you have to like scrape resources and say, how am I gonna acquire music? Like music licensing is very expensive, and
Mm.
so we approached a lot of friends and like the very 80s synthy thing that Thomas sings. That's from my little brother's like childhood best friend who makes music, and it's this group that it's just him, and they're called Akin Mannequin, and I just love this like weird synthy, like almost like Joy Division sounding, and
Yeah,
and and
totally.
I, and I thought it was even weirder that there's like even karaoke available for that. I thought it's like this family's so depressed and they're choosing the saddest songs to sing, like a soul song from the 60s that's about love, but it's kind of melancholic, and then this like weird dreamy 80s sounding song. But
Mm.
again, all the stuff that plays in the restaurants was like friends of our composer, and we were able to license them for very cheap, thankfully, to these groups who were willing to share their music. And then we actually used some of the composer's music because he plays in bands in Salt Lake, and he was also our sound guy. So it's just like so many things, and he ended up making the score, and I just loved what he did. It was Andrew Shaw, and it was his first time writing for a horror movie. He had done Kenny's movies, but they were all
Oh
like
wow, okay.
kind of like off kilter comedy films, and this was like very drony and very brooding, and he kind of got it on the first pass. Like we were pretty happy. We didn't really have too many notes, but yeah, the Helene Smith thing is very cool because she's actually from Miami. Like she still lives in Miami, and I actually
Oh
had the
wow.
chance to meet her, and I told her about the film, and maybe she just wasn't into the idea of a horror film, but it was still cool to meet her. And I know that she was part of the soul movement in the 60s in Miami when it was like known as the Motown of the South. So
Mm.
there's just a lot of history there. And being able to, again, call back to our hometown of Miami and have like a little piece of it in the movie was very important. And Kenny wanted to use that song in a film, and he let us use it. So thank you, Kenny.
That's awesome. I love that. Now, you had mentioned kind of as a transition into more recent music. You had mentioned, was it your older brother that was in like the music scene?
Yeah, my actually both of my brothers. My younger brother played bass, and my older brother Mike, who's the cinematographer, he played trumpet first in high school, but then in hardcore bands he would play drums.
Oh,
So yeah,
okay.
yeah,
So the funny thing and so how I'm gonna kind of relate this to that time, the earlier 2000s, as far as hardcore music, or like some like the screamo different stuff, it was
yeah,
a time of like they would have song titles where it would be like two sentences long. I don't know.
yeah,
Do you
yeah,
remember this? Is
yeah,
this like okay?
yeah.
So The funny thing, I had discovered somebody had did a review of My Heart Can't Beat Unless You Tell It To on Letterboxd, and so
Mhm.
the first thing I saw was the title, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? Automatically drew me in, and it was just one of those things where from the start that was the first thing that drew me in, and then coming to find out it's a horror movie. I
Yeah.
didn't read anything about it. I didn't want to know anything about it. I went in to check it out. Come to find out, there was a lot of moments in the movie where I was like, is this kid really supposed to be a vampire? Like,
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out what is going on. But what can you tell us as far as the title? Were there other working titles? I
Yeah.
wholeheartedly believe that this complemented it, because I
Okay.
might not have picked it up, because honestly, I'm not a huge vampire guy. And there's been
Yeah.
very many, moments over the years where I'm like, I just can't do
Yeah.
this shit. Loved it, and I loved
Thank you.
the title choosing. That was something that was just so wild and funny enough. I've seen other people online that say something, like, why did they name it this? This is a
Yeah. Yeah.
ridiculously long. It's fucking
I love
awesome.
it.
Do it, do it.
I love the separation and the differences. Like that's part of the fun is like I've read so many of the letterbox reviews that for me it made me like get a thicker skin because now I'm like, well, I don't care if you hate the movie, it's fine. And because a lot of people like the movie, so it's cool to see like different opinions. And some people are like, "What is this fucking title? It sounds like a Fallout Boy song or something." And then some people love it, and they're like, "Oh, this is like some
No.
Sergio Martino shit, like some Giallo shit." And and I'm like, "Well, it's kind of like neither, but I respect both of those opinions."
Sure.
And we did, I'm just like, nah, I feel like I'm not good at titles. Like it's so hard to come up with something that encompasses a whole movie, especially when you're making a feature. You're like, shit, this is what it's going to be known as forever, which is, I guess, like precious thinking. But yeah, this my friend Mitch on here. He's the one who called it a Fallout Boy song, but he meant it as a compliment, kind of.
Okay. Okay.
um, and so I we had other working titles. One of them was The Sibling, and then Kenny was like, that kind of sounds like it's a movie that would star Adam Sandler. And so we were like, yeah, that's probably going to be an Adam Sandler movie in the future. So we'll just ditch that title. Um,
Oh
and then
shit.
for some reason, I just started looking at like songs and lyrics. And then when Kenny told us about this one, we were like, shit, this has a lot to do with our movie, I Am Controlled by Your Love. But we started looking into the lyrics and we're like, fuck, this is like the movie. It's like My Heart Can't Beat Unless You Tell It To. It can be taken literally. It's obviously thematically, and it's about the love of the family, and the codependency. And so, yeah, that's how we came up with that title. But there was Death in the Sick Room, which was like an Edward Monk, Munch. I don't know
Whoa.
how to pronounce
Okay.
his name. That's the
Sure.
name of one of his paintings, and I like that title, but it was a little too like indulgent. So well, yeah, too indulgent, but we went with the fucking 8-word title instead. But yeah, I like the long titles. I like A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. I don't feel at home in this world
Yes.
anymore. So
Yes.
that's
Totally agree.
it's just a matter of taste, I guess.
Sure. I mean, there's certain points where um, I'm trying to think of different movies that come to mind. But even having like a single word, or like it being like a couple of words or whatnot. I mean, like you can obviously if it's fitting the story and it kind of wraps everything together nicely. Like, oh, okay, cool. But that was the audit. That was the first thing that I noticed about the movie, and it drew me in, whether it was going to be a horror movie or not. That was just one of those things. And you mentioning movies like A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, that was like one of those things that very
Yeah,
much resonated, where I was like, oh, what is this, and then come to find out being a horror, I was like, fucking jackpot. So
yeah.
absolutely awesome.
Long
Love it.
titles like my friend, he put Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, Everything Everywhere All at Once. The era of
Oh
the long
yeah.
title. But I'll say this: my next film is going to be 2 words max because it's a pain in the ass for like it's crazy how like administratively it's kind of a pain. Like my social media cannot be the whole title, so it's just hard can't be. When I tell people, they're like, "What's the name of your movie?" And I'm like, "All right, are you ready? Like, get out a piece of paper and a pen." Like, and so next time, just an easy word or two.
Okay. Okay. All right. All right. Well, I have to say, I mean, even complimenting, on the cover art that, that ended up, showing as far as with on the Blu-ray there. Uh, so rad, dude.
Thank
I
you.
absolutely love everything about it. And truly, I mean, everything about, just the whole, I think it was something too that I went in, and it just took me by complete surprise, not having any idea of what was, going on, and then just going back and
Yeah,
then knowing, what's going on and revisiting the amount of times I have for research and just pure enjoyment purposes. I've
cool.
loved it, man. It's been so fucking awesome. So thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
great way to go into a movie is like not know anything about it.
I agree.
Even if you don't know the genre. I remember I saw The Eyes of My Mother and I didn't even know it was a horror movie and it just
Oh yeah,
blew me away. And so
yeah.
I appreciate it.
For sure, for sure. All right, before I let you go here, we've run a little long. Do you have a couple more minutes here?
Yeah, yeah, good.
Okay, so before we go here, I was trying to conjure up an idea, something fun to wrap up, some of these as far as the film guests that I've been having on, and for today, I wanted to do something that's a new bit. I'd like to call the lo-fi horror rental shop. You know what I'm saying? The lo-fi horror rental. So what we did here is I grabbed three movies out of my collection, and I'm just gonna pop them up here one at a time, go over the
Okay.
title and the cover art,
All right.
and you tell me which of these that you would bring home on a nice Saturday night with some Pepsi and maybe a nice Domino's pizza. You know what I'm
Choco
saying?
Taco. Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, we have starring Edward Furlong and Frank Langella. We've got Brain Scan. Have you seen this bad boy?
No, but I've heard of it.
All right, all right. So
Edward
I'm not gonna say
Furlong.
any
Oh,
more. So
okay.
we got the computerized font. You have the trickster face there. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
almost
Uh,
scanners
so
vibes.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Speaking of scanners, very funny enough. Next up, we have Scanner
Scanner
Cop.
cop.
Have you ever heard of this bad boy here? This is
No,
actually the original
no.
cover art there. Uh,
Hmm.
Very rad. If spoiler alert, it's about a cop that can scan people's minds.
Okay. I
So
wouldn't have guessed.
just by the font there, maybe the cover art.
Sick. I
I don't
like
know what exactly might draw you in.
the eye light thing.
And then to keep it ridiculous, just in case you're wanting to have one of those nights here, I picked up Tammy and the T Rex. Have you ever heard of this?
No, but I just recently saw Velocipaster, so I'm gonna have to watch it.
Actually, starring Denise Richards and Paul Walker. Rest in peace.
Oh
You
shit.
got Tammy and the T Rex here. It's a Vinegar Syndrome release. I don't know if you're
Okay.
familiar with
Yeah,
the
yeah,
company
yeah.
or not.
Of course.
Great stuff. But if you were at the video rental and you had these three, this you spent
Hmm.
hours sorting through. Which of these movies would you rent? Tammy and the T
Okay.
Rex, Brain Scan, or Scanner Cop, and why?
And I'm gonna actually watch the one that I pick. I'll let you know what I think. But
Sick.
I think I'm gonna go with Brain Scan because
Yes.
I love the art and I feel like it's gonna be fun. Like even it
So
just
rad.
looks ridiculous but also kind of scary and I like the mirror image and anything with the word scan in it. Sorry, scanner cop. But I'm gonna go with the brain scan.
I love it. And man, when you watch it, you're going to love it. It's a '90s movie in all of its glory. It's
Cool.
about Edward Furlong and his best friend discovered this video called Brain Scan, or it's a video game called Brain Scan,
Hmm.
where it's a true to life 4D interactive experience where you go and you have to go in and you embody a serial killer. You have to hunt down
Whoa.
somebody and go through the different steps as far as breaking into the house. Come to find
Okay.
out, these things are actually happening, and they have to figure out if they're the ones doing it or if it's somebody else. Great
All
choice,
right.
man.
I will look it up.
Absolutely. Look, Jonathan, this has been so awesome, man. I
Yeah, thank
really
you.
appreciate it. I appreciate you coming on at Halloween and dealing with me and my Jason mask and looking like an absolute dickhead. This has been awesome. I really
Yeah,
appreciate all your
dude.
work, man,
Yeah.
and your family as well. Come to find out, everybody, touching or taking part in helping out. Awesome, man. Thank you. Thank all you
Yeah,
guys for
yeah.
sure.
I'm happy we finally got to sit down and talk. So
Yeah,
thanks, man.
for sure. I don't think it'll be the last time. So, in
Yeah.
the meantime, you take care and then stay healthy, man.
All
Have a
right,
good
dude.
one. All
Take
right.
care.
See ya.
Talk. So.
He's a lo-fi horror guy. Yeah, he's kind of a guy, but he is so lo-fi, lo-fi, a horror guy. Yeah. Lo-fi horror guy has been recorded in front of a live studio audience.